Warning. This is the most important
podcast
of our lifetime.
Hello, everyone.
What is Hapatarian?
So what is Hapa? So when you put together Hapatarians, what is that?
You know the thing.
They're here to awkward it up for you guys.
Which is a very interesting and beautiful mix of humanity.
Anyone who has a podcast,
You're an extremist.
Shut up!
all right, let's get to it. Hey, what's happening? And welcome to the Hapatarians Show, the #1 podcast hosted by someone who never takes his beanie off, ever. Please don't forget to subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and in the comments, tell us how much you love the Hapa ethno-state. Our guest today is someone who is the biggest advocate that I know for Trump Kaczynski 2024, and I wouldn't even be surprised if he has the Guinness World Record for most time suspended off of Twitter. It's the host of the Pete Quinones Show, Pete Quinones. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, man. How are you? Thanks for inviting.
I'm doing okay. Thanks for coming on. So we'll just get right into it. So one of the main reasons that I wanted you on is because I wanted to read a tweet that I'm sure you're very familiar with, I guess we can say. So I don't want to say this person's name because who gives a shit? But I think what he tweeted was interesting, to say the least. So his tweet goes, "I don't think policing ideas is possible or moral. I am okay with policing actions that harm people or violate people's rights. So you keep the kid from getting the surgery." He's talking about like trans surgery and getting your dick or breast cut off, whichever. "So you keep the kid from getting the surgery until they're an adult, or remove them from any parent or who mutilates them in secret. Bad ideas wear off." Now it's that last part, bad ideas wear off, where I saw that. I mean, the whole thing is just like a complete, like, what the hell are you talking about? But that bad ideas wear off, I just don't understand that, because you can make the argument, and I'm sure anybody out there can make the argument, well, any idea can be considered a bad idea. There's so many ideas out there in the world now that someone can think that conservatism is a bad idea, progressivism is a bad idea, libertarianism is a bad idea. So, Pete, what do you think about that? Like, do you think bad ideas wear off? And if not, then what are we doing here then?
Well, I think that bad ideas can wear off if they're allowed to, but if they're promoted, they're not going to wear off. I mean, the Federal Reserve was a bad idea. As constructed, it was a bad idea. Mm-hmm. Why hasn't it worn off? Well, because it's pushed. It's taught that it's the only way. It's the way forward. It's the way to build wealth. It's the easiest way for somebody to build wealth, for an average person to build wealth. It's if we... are you going to have gold in your house, just stacked up in your house? I mean, the Federal Reserve was a bad idea, but it's promoted. So fast forward to trans. The trans thing is pushed in people's faces. And it's not organic. It wasn't something that happened because, I think every one of us probably remembers somebody who was trans, or at least cross-dressing 10, 15 years ago. But this is something very different. And this didn't grow out of that. This grew out of somebody promoting it, somebody with a lot of money, somebody with an agenda. And the problem is that, yes, maybe in an individual, the bad idea will disappear. And, given enough time, they'll see the error of their ways. But generally, if you are surrounded by people who are propagating this bad idea as well, and we've heard all these stories about how one person in like a high school will go trans, and then like 4 of their friends will. I mean, these numbers just don't work. You have a better chance of hitting the lottery than that actually happening, that being organic. when you have ideas that are being pushed that are mutilating people, that is basically will keep them hooked to pharma for the rest of their lives, will cause emotional problems. And there's probably already emotional and mental problems from the start. Bad ideas don't go away, especially when they're pushed by who people deem as the authority, this regime. And yeah, I just the idea that you don't crush bad you crush bad idea if your child has a bad idea, starts smoking cigarettes when they're 10 years old, you're going to step in it and you're going to stop that with force if necessary. Um, I don't understand how people can look and not see that this isn't something that a decision that people are making on their own. It's almost like this mass kind of brainwashing, this mass kind of psychosis that is taking advantage of a people that, um, obviously not everyone is turning trans, but there's a small segment of the population that is, con- you know, is inclined towards this kind of brainwashing. Well, stop that. Stop that. I mean, I honestly believe these are the kind of people that if it was put out there that, 1400 on the SAT is, and I don't even know how they score SATs anymore. That's how old I am. It was perfect score when I was a kid. It could be different now, but if you say 1400 is the only acceptable score, these are the kind of people who will be like, that's what I'm aiming for. That's what I'm going for. Now, that's a form of brainwashing as well, but it's not. They're not chopping their dick off.
Right. It's crazy that it's come to this, right? Like, it's now come to, boys getting their dicks chopped off and girls getting their breasts removed or whatever. And I just don't understand how people can look at that, especially now being a dad. It's completely different mindset, because for my journey or whatever you want to call it, going from in 2020, I was kind of just this, I don't know, I guess I was a naive guy, oh yeah, just do whatever you want. Live well.
We were hanging out in New York for debates.
Right.
Debates that mean nothing. You look back on them and you're like, well, that was great for social hour, but it really didn't, whose life did that change?
Yeah, it was a great hang. But yeah, at kind of the end of the day, the big picture of it all, it was just like a little speck of time. And so how I went from that to where I am now, I've had a huge shift, and I know you have too, where you've had this huge shift from where you were in 2020. And I know the COVID thing really helped escalate that. And then that was also my experience. But then having a kid, it was like, oh yeah, there's a lot more to life than, oh yeah, partying and smoking or whatever. I mean, not that I'm saying I do any of that stuff, but just the whole that is not just about you anymore. There's more things in life that are a lot more important than just when am I gonna go bang the next whore or something like that? You know what I mean? And so I think that that's kind of what frustrates me, seeing people that are just okay with this, or they're willing to kind of just, well, it's not hurting me personally, so why should I have a problem with it? I just can't understand that. And it's the same thing now, kind of what we're going through with miscarriages or anything like that. You see how people they try to compare that to, oh, well, baby's 9 weeks old. Look at it. It looks like a cum shot. It's like, excuse me, sir. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. When you see a picture of a fucking 9-week-old baby, it does not look like that. There's actually a head and there's some eye. It looks like a human being. I'm sorry. So no, I don't care. Abortion should be illegal. I don't give a fuck. That's it. If you have an abortion, and if you're forced to do it and you're young and naive and don't know what you're doing and stupid, then I definitely get that, because there's some women out there who've done that where they didn't know what they were doing, and now they look back at it, and it's a huge thing they think about, and it's grief. I'm talking about like nowadays, where all these women are just, I've had 10 abortions. They wear a T-shirt or whatever. Oh, let me flaunting all this shit. I'm like, come on. I just don't understand how people can look at that and just think of it as like a trophy.
Well, think about where you just said that you have no problem with abortion being illegal, and I don't either within the current paradigm, of course. But when it comes down to it, the fact that we even have to argue whether it can be legal or illegal really shows where we are. The fact that there are people who, we're sharing a polity with, and sharing a quote unquote culture with, who think it's okay, that's a problem. It's it's just like the trans issue. Well, how did it become okay for abortion, for people to believe that abortion is there's nothing, it's a neutral, there's nothing, it's actually good, it's good for women. Well, it's, again, just like the trans thing, it's a narrative. Someone designed the narrative and put it out there. People caught on to it. It was taught in the schools as well. And you see it in the press, and they just saturate with it. And enough people, if you get enough people to latch on to it and say it's a good, and not only that it's a good, but anybody who says it's not a good is actually evil and wants to control people, wants to oppress people, wants to tell women what to do, wants to treat women like property, things like that. I mean, when it comes down to it, if we had a proper culture, I mean, the question of whether abortion was wrong or not, that wouldn't even be a question. It would just be a given. I remember talking to, the first time I had Orrin McIntyre on the show, we were talking about covenant communities, and Hans Hermann Hoppe talking about covenant communities, and I told them, and I said, it'd be like the kind of thing where you come in, you sign a contract saying this, you'll give up this right, this liberty, to have all these liberties, and to also have the security of being around people who are like-minded and share your values. And Orrin just stopped me right there, and he's like, that won't work. And I'm like, well, why won't that work? He goes, because as soon as you have to if you have to put something down on paper, it's not going to work. Because it should be able to be unspoken. It should be able to be, if you're sharing a polity with people who share your values, they're unspoken. The only reason you even write them down is to formalize it. It's not to enforce it. It's not, writing words down on paper shouldn't be an enforcement mechanism. It should be a this is what, this is how we formalize what we believe. This is like our mission statement. And a mission statement wouldn't be like laws. As soon as you have to put down what you can't do, what you're not allowed to do, and what you are allowed to do, you're basically saying this needs to be enforced, and it shouldn't have to be enforced. Everybody should be on the same page already.
And that's another thing that frustrates me too, is that there's people out there, conservatives, and where they're saying, oh, I have no problem with people who are living in the same neighborhood, but they all have different ideas and different beliefs and all stuff. And I'm just thinking, how in the hell is that even gonna? How is that even possible? I mean, I guess you can argue that maybe it's happening right now, because I have no idea what my neighbor thinks. But for all I know, they could hate me because, oh, you believe in this? Well, screw it. Like, if everybody put their political beliefs out there in the world, I guarantee you a lot of those people, if they knew that their neighbor was different from them, oh shit, I gotta get the fuck out of here. There's no way I'm living with so and so because he believes in this or whatever. Like, there's no way. I can't understand that there's people who would think that too. And that's another thing where it kind of it was like shattering all these things all these pieces that I had set, where oh yeah, I believe in this, and then seeing all these different beliefs, and I have my beliefs, and I'm gonna stick to them no matter what. I mean and I think that's fine if you get to that point where you feel like that's it, like this is it. But I also think it's natural for humans to grow, not just obviously, anatomy wise, but mind and belief and all that stuff. And I think and I know you see it because I see it. I don't comment, but I definitely see it where people are like, I can't believe you said this. And you used to be like this 5 years ago. Pete was pretty cool. Now I can't. And it's like, maybe he just learned different things and he had different experiences than you. So that's why he feels the way he does now.
Well, particularly with libertarianism. And I mean, I think you know how hardcore I was. I mean, did a friggin' documentary on AnarchoCapitalism.
Yeah.
It's still on Amazon Prime. And, I stand by the fact that I made it, and I like a lot of the ideas, especially the decentralizing ideas in there. But I think one of the things that bothered me the most is I like my arguments to have some, if I'm going to make an argument for something, I like to be able to refer to reality and refer to some kind of practicality for it. And I think the big problem that I found with libertarianism is that I just kept making moral claims. And when you're making moral claims to justify your position and to justify what you think the world should look like, you have to be able to back those up in some way. How are you going to enforce them? And, when you look at something like, say, abortion, and in the current paradigm that we live in, if you're going to stop abortion, you're not going to be able to stop it completely. But if you are going to drastically reduce it, make it very hard to access, you're going to have to use force. You're going to have to use the force of the state. And I couldn't run around. And after seeing 2020 and seeing how people reacted to, a virus and, threats of, I mean, we pretty much knew immediately that you and I knew you weren't, people your age weren't going to die. I knew there was a slight chance people my age were going to die, especially if we were in poor health. But it was mostly happening to 75 and 80-year-olds. And, the average age in like the first 6 months of people who were dying from it was like higher than the average life expectancy. So when I saw that people were not only going to bow down to it, but that there was a whole segment of the population that was going to enforce it. And how are they enforcing it? They were basically using the libertarians' argument of morality. Oh, you're immoral. You want grandma, you want to kill grandma and everything like that. It really made me go, So I think I'm moral. They think I think what I'm doing and what I'm advocating for is moral. They think what they're advocating for is moral. How do we solve that issue, especially if they're complete opposites? And the only separation would be the easiest. Splitting up, divorce, some way, shape, or form. But if you are forced to live together and you do not want those people to be able to control your life like they did for many people, 2.5 years, you're going to have to be willing to do things, get your own power, whether it be local or however, and make it appear legitimate in people's eyes. I mean, that means running for office, becoming mayor, becoming sheriff, whatever. And you're going to have to make sure that your morality and your opinion trumps theirs politically. And the only way you can do that is with force. And once I came to that conclusion, my AnCapism and libertarianism, immediately people were like, well, you're not an ANCAP, you're not a libertarian. And I'm like, I'm alive. And, I didn't stick a needle in my arm, even though I faked it on a trip to New York and had a nice little, so I could go to Scott's thing. And people were like, "Oh, you took the jab." And I'm like, you know how easy it was to get one of those cards? Just about everyone I knew had one of those cards. Some people were just like, well, I don't want to use it out of principle. Okay, that's fine. But, I wanted to be there for Scott's debate and everything, and I did. But to get back to, if you are going to defeat these people, and these people, they won the election in 2020. They won the election in 2020. And they're in power, and basically what I see them doing is seeking to punish in any way, shape, or form people who questioned the COVID narrative, questioned the election narrative, questioned the Ukraine narrative, now question the trans narrative. And that's because these people have power. And if we want to stop them, we're going to have to figure out some way to do it using power. And by using power, you're also going to have to be willing to use force in order to do it. Maybe you don't do it personally. Maybe you back somebody. Maybe you have somebody who, I don't want people. I would never run for office because I don't want people looking through my finances. And you have to put your finances out there and everything. And I'm not saying that my finances are great. I'm just really, for somebody who puts as much of himself out there, I'm really private about that. Just family taught me that way. If you back somebody, if you back the sheriff, if you are somebody who's an advisor, an advisor who's not on the books, not getting paid, no problem with that. So, we're going to have to get power in order to overthrow these people. When I interviewed Paul Gottfried recently, I had been thinking in my head, and I had said it and caught a lot of crap for it, is that I think that this regime, the way it's going, the only way it's going to be defeated is through right-wing authoritarianism, a right-wing authoritarian movement or leader to rise up and to crush these people. And that's what Paul Gottfried, who's, known everyone from like Sam Francis and James Burnham to Marcuse, he's known commies, is like, yeah, I agree. The only thing that's going to stop this, and I see it in history, is right-wing authoritarianism. And at this point, I have no problem with that. I don't, it's like Charles Haywood says. Charles Haywood says, everyone's like, oh, well, how do you know he won't set his sights on you? Well, I'm not a parasite. Mm-hmm. He's only going to set his sights on people who are a threat to him. I'm not a threat to him. I wouldn't be a threat to him or to that movement. I would do everything I could to support it, because we're being basically controlled by people who have the same kind of attitude as like the Bolsheviks, that there are people who, because they believe certain things, they believe in God, they believe in family, they believe in right and wrong, objective truth, that these people shouldn't be in society. And if they can't be jailed, or if they can't, they will do anything to stop them, and I'd rather have somebody, it's at this point, you're either going to beat the crap out of someone or get the crap beat out of you. And I'm sorry, but the things that I used to advocate for, everything I've seen in the last 3 years, it's all gone right out the window. There's just maybe that can come later. I actually think that if you had a right-wing authoritarian and he cracked down, parts of the country could be very libertarian, actually. But you're not going to have that with this. And you're not going to change what exists right now with live and let live, or with being so principled about not using the power of the state. If I was in charge, I would use the military. to achieve my goals. And I know that sounds, some say Machiavellian, some would say LARP. I'm LARPing. Okay, you say whatever you want. It's fine. I'm good. I'm good with that. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't accuse me of anything you want. But I don't see a libertarian or anarcho-capitalist solution out of this. I see there are some things in that libertarians talk about that can be used to mitigate in the meantime damage, but those aren't really even like private property and decentralization or homesteading, things like that, growing your own food. Those aren't specific to libertarianism. So the whole morality thing, once you realize that you think you're the most moral person, and the leftist who wants you to hold you down and stick a needle in your arm thinks they're moral too. You have a dilemma. There is a dilemma, and there's only one way to solve that dilemma.
And it kind of makes you wonder how sound of a philosophy libertarianism is if there's two people who claim to be libertarian, but like you're saying, one believes that you should get the jab and the other one says no. How can those two correlate if they both believe that they're libertarian? That's another thing that kind of doesn't make any sense. And then you also mentioned using power to gain the goals that you would like to see be achieved. And libertarians, for the most part, I'm sure there's some that aren't like this, but for the most part, they seem to have this mentality of, if you do vote for someone in some high ranking official, whatever, that they're just not gonna do anything. And I like that, the famous Adam Kokesh being, if I become president, then I'm going to leave the next day. What's the point then? What's the point of running if you win and then you're just going to leave the next day? Like, it's almost like, okay, I won, bye. And everyone's like, wait, what the hell? I voted for you. I put my time and effort into this. And now what? So I think there was kind of like a mishap there, and I'm nowhere near as well read as you are, Pete. So I'm just kind of basing. I'm kind of like floating all this in my head, trying to like wrap it around. Like,
well, it's logical. So much of it is logical. You don't even. Sure, some theory, and I've even really concentrated less on theory now and more on history, looking at historic examples of what we're seeing now. I mean, it's just it's logic. You don't have to be, you don't have to be a Carl Schmitt scholar like Paul Gottfried.
No, that's true. I guess I was kind of saying that, because you are right that your show has definitely gone a completely different direction, which I'm sure many of your listeners really appreciate. I'm one of them, and it's really been something where I'll listen to an episode and I'm like, hadn't thought of it that way. That's really, instead of kind of listening and hearing the same things over and over and over again. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, AnCap. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if we just lived in AnCapistan, that'd be great. But we don't live in AnCapistan, so now what the fuck? Now what do we do? We live in 2023 America. So now what do? We don't live in freaking 3,000 in Capistan, whenever that's going to happen, I mean, who knows? Maybe that will happen in 1,000 years. But again, that's 1,000 years from now. We're not going to live that long. I mean, unless some major medicine thing comes out. Oh yeah.
Well, we want to plan for the future. We want, what's that? They say, plant a tree that you'll never sit in the shade.
Yeah.
And I know what I'm advocating for. If I feel it in my lifetime, it's going to be at the most local level. I mean, it's right now we're fighting for the future now, and I've accepted that, and I remember it was like last year sometime there was just a very spurgy autistic showing up in my YouTube comments and talking about why don't you talk about Ancapistan anymore? I'm like, well, because Ancapistan is not going to happen. And, they're like, well, Tom, and I think he said like Tom Woods thinks it's going to happen. And I'm like, Tom Woods thinks it's going to happen and it'll happen soon. And I'm like, okay. So I immediately texted Tom Woods and I said, do you have time to come on the show? And one of the things that I did was I ended it by saying, if you, I made him a bet. I said, would you bet this body part that, Ancapistan would happen in the next 50 years? And he's like, no, are you crazy? Like, you hope for some kind of secession and decentralization in the next 50 years. And then you just start working towards everything, which means that Tom understands, just like I do, that the work that we're doing right now, we're not going to see the benefit of it. And that's fine. It's, I don't think of myself as a great man at all. I just think of myself as somebody who, is very interested in ideas that are outside of the mainstream. And I'm also somebody who looks at, has a vision of the world that is drastically different than the world as it exists right now. So I look into the past and I'm like, what can I glean from what's happened? And how do I, can some of these ideas in the past work? So let me push them out there and hopefully they'll take hold and the next generation will pick up on them and the next generation, until we can get to the point where maybe this thing falls apart on its own, or somebody puts a grand plan together where they get enough people in like 50 state houses, and then you get someone elected and you work on dismantling, or you get like a Caesar or a Franco who rises up and just burns the whole thing to the ground and becomes dictator. And I mean, I'm fine with the last one too. I have no problem with that. But yeah, man, I don't expect the work I'm doing right now is, and I assume that once I'm gone, I'll be forgotten. I don't think my name's gonna, it's gonna be like Murray Rothbard, and people are gonna be talking about him, or or Oswald Spengler. That 100 years later, people will be mentioning my name. But I'll just do my part, and hopefully one day if there is an afterlife, and I think there is, I'll be able to see the fruits of whatever I did, even if it's 1,000 years from now. But I still honestly believe that if people really concentrated at the local level right now and really concentrated on getting into small towns and working a good strategy, that you could see a lot of the kind of peace and the kind of high trust culture building that what it takes to have real order and nonviolence. And I think I think I've been working towards it, and I think what I've done recently is really going to pay off over the next 6 months personally for me. But I've also told people, I said, don't, until you get your own situation set up, that you can maybe grow some of your own food and maybe have an income that's not dependent upon you're not an industry where you're getting canceled. Maybe not think about becoming politically active, definitely not running for office until you do that. It's a lot. I think it's very easy to, I don't think it's very easy. I think concentrated effort for, if you really concentrate on like 2 or 3 years of improving yourself and your situation, you can get yourself into it with really good planning and even a little bit of luck. You can get yourself in a situation where you'll feel like, well, the state really isn't touching me here. The state's not I don't think about the state 24/7, like somebody who would live in a city or something like that, where you're always being touched by even the most local hand of the state.
Yeah, and like you had mentioned, high trust societies and all that. That would be a really hard thing to accomplish, because I mean, I know I don't trust everyone, so that would kind of be hard to trust your neighbors and all that. So like you're saying, you kind of have to have that like that mentality of working hard, that concentrated effort that you're talking about. And when you're also talking about like where Congress has to do this, every single, like a lot of people in Congress have to agree on decentralizing this and that. I mean, we see it all the time where something's, oh, should we get rid of this? And it's like, no, we should just keep it. So it kind of makes you be like, yeah, like you were saying, the local level would be a more attainable goal to live your life in like in terms of like localism and all that. And I mean, you even were talking to someone where they were involved in local politics, but even that was extremely nasty, where they were going after him and all that stuff because of something that he had tweeted or whatever it was, And so so I guess another thing too to add to that is that, and I know you had mentioned this too about when Donald Trump was running, or I guess is running again, but the whole like he didn't give up everything because he still had that. Well, if it doesn't work out, I still have something to fall back on or something like that. Like you have to have someone that has to have that. I'm all in on this. Like all the poker chips are in. I can't take this anymore. America is falling apart. What I'm seeing with my own two eyes, it's not good. I want to try and make it better. So I'm going all in. You can't just be like, I'm going to raise you 500,000, but I still have a few 100,000 chips left here in my stack. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's a really hard thing to get to. And I'm sure you realize that too. Like you're saying, like this isn't going to be something that's going to happen within our lifetime or 2 or 3 or however many lifetimes it's going to be. But if you're able to change a few people's minds about that, and then they can tell their children about it, and it just keeps on growing and growing, then yeah, I think you've made an impact. And I think even having a small impact, despite all the hard work you've done, I think that's got to be gratifying. And I'm sure you've heard people be like, yeah, I used to think this, but then heard your podcast, your writing, and then it's like, oh yeah, it's completely, wow, a whole head just completely explode. It's like, the gift, like everything's exploding. So to kind of, I guess, wrap up that whole diatribe that I've been saying, where you're talking about decentralization and private property. And it's another thing that I wanted to have you on about is having order. And I know that we've kind of alluded to that, but having those 3 things, because you can't have the first 2 without the third one, because if everyone's kind of doing their own thing and it's like, well, what if this person started doing it? It's fine. You have to have some kind of order to make sure that everyone kind of has the society that they want to live in, because you don't want people moving away from that society. That's not going to be good for your economy.
Well, order is the hardest part. You mentioned, I talked about high trust society, but I mean, at this point, you just can't have that. You would need almost a true private property society, something very intentionally planned. So if you are going to say you come up with a plan to, me and 10 people who think like I do, we're going to get the mayorship, we're going to get the sheriff, and we're going to get the school locally. And you get it. Well, the way it works now is not everybody in that is going to be on your side. It's not everybody's going to agree with you, and you're going to have people who are going to want to fight against you. But it's okay if they disagree with you, you would definitely, you would prefer to live around people who think like you do. And you're not going to have 100%. You have to figure out what's most important. And, but you are going to have troublemakers. How do you deal with crime?
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with, if your society, if your town is a town of where the majority of the people go to church, you have a majority Christian town. Like there are towns here in Alabama that are that are 2,500 people, and there's multiple churches. What do you do if someone has like a pop-up gay pride parade? Well, I mean, there's one way to make sure it doesn't happen again. People don't want to really talk about that, but there's you crush them. You arrest them. If they raise a hand, you get 5 times more violent than they are. You have to make examples of people. I mean, we're in a the whole thing was, if you look at like back in the 1970s, Anita Bryant down in Florida, she was like the Florida orange juice lady. She like did all the ads for Florida orange juice. And she was a Christian, and she was against homosexual, homosexual. They wanted to give homosexuals special rights, more like basically expand the Civil Rights Act into, include. And she's like, this is going to be a slippery slope. She goes, they're not going to stop here. They're going to want to get married. They're going to want to get married. They're going to want to adopt kids. They're going to want to have political power and wield political power. And she was destroyed. Her life was destroyed. National TV. She was right. So the problem with degeneracy in general, and leftist kind of, there's this old thing. I was talking to Bert, neocon remover, and we were talking one day, and I was saying, yeah, man, I know some right wingers who are just, they're really like hedonists and everything like that. He's like, yeah, but they keep it quiet, right? They do it in private. They don't try to promote what they're doing, right? And I'm like, yeah. Because the left doesn't do that. When the left does something, when they, decide, polyamory is, this is going to be the thing. This is what I'm into now. They don't want to hide it. They want it to be celebrated. They want it to be legitimized. You remember Tom Woods? Somebody was talking about, and it was 2017 or early 2018. Sex work is real, work, and we need to celebrate prostitution. And he just went in on them. It's like, if sex work is real work, please put it on your resume when you when you go for a job. But they need it celebrated, and you see it with the whole trans movement now. Is not only do trans people, not only are they supposed to be tolerated, not only are many of them going to be on public health, which taxpayers are going to have to pay for, but you have to celebrate it. And if you don't celebrate it, and if you at all criticize it, well, you're a bad person. You're to be destroyed. You're a fascist. You're, racist. You're any number of these terms. We look at what the regime has become, where in San Francisco, unless you go into a place, a business, and steal over $1,000, that you're not to be arrested, you're not to be touched. And even if you do steal more and you are arrested, you're slap on the wrist and you're out the next day. But if the person who uses a gun chooses to use a gun against somebody who's robbing and destroying their store, these people will have the book thrown at them. That's not order. That's literally chaos. It's asking good people who may have went out of their way to save for decades to start their own business, their dream, to basically bend over and take it. And hey, you have insurance, right? Yeah, just write it off on your insurance. Sure. We can't continue to live like this. And honestly, I look at like places that don't have high crime in the world, and anywhere you look, it's homogenous society or a society that has discipline, like Singapore. Singapore, you get caned publicly if you spit gum on the street. I know that it's very illiberal of me to say this, but I think really that's the way you keep order in a society. And the funny thing is that if you look at Singapore, it's liberal. People can pretty much do what they want. They can start businesses. It's easier to start a business in Singapore than it is in the United States by far. Make a lot of money. They're pro markets, but they don't have crime. And when somebody does commit a crime, they make sure to mete out justice immediately. And I don't see any other way forward at this point, especially since we've gone so far off the rails. People always talk about, they say, well, there's been such a far swing to the left. When things change, it's going to be this huge swing to the right. And I say that it's gone so far off the rails that like a swing in the other direction now would probably end up in the middle. If it was to go all the way far right, I mean, that would be a miracle at this point. But I think we need to, if we're going to have order, if you're going to have decentralization, if you're going to have private property, you are going to need order. And order comes in many ways. Once again, societies that are high trust or societies where people know if they step out of line, they're going to get disciplined for it. So, when I talk about order, I'm talking about the natural and the organic kind, like high trust and homogeneity, or discipline. And at this point, I think on the local level, you could have high trust, but I think anything national or statewide is probably going to have a lot of discipline attached to it. And it's a scary thought for people, but you've allowed it to get this bad. They've allowed it. We've allowed it to get this bad. So how do we think we're going to fix any of this? Any at all? It's going to take drastic measures, and drastic measures isn't, well, we just need to end the state, or we just need to end public schooling, or we just need to, oh, you don't like Drag Queen Story Hour? Close all the libraries. The libraries should all be private. Okay, so you want private Drag Queen Story Hour where your kids go into? What? Oh, well, then I don't have to send them there. You don't have to send your kids to public school either. But still 97% of the other kids are going to be going, and what are they going to be like in 20 years? I mean, you go online now and you start, you talk about how insane abortion is, or how insane the Ukraine war is, and you just have people attacking you. How could you? Did you know Putin? Don't you know Putin is just like Hitler, and he wants to, put the band back together as far as the Soviet Union goes? Is that what you want? Is that you want Hitler? Is that what you want? Really, you don't even want to ask me that question at this point. But how do you? If they're this bad now, what are their kids going to be like in 20 years when they go into this? When they go into the same indoctrination camps, and those camps are only escalating in their insanity. I mean, you can homeschool your kids, and I tell people, you got to homeschool your kids. You can't let them go anywhere near these people. But in the meantime, if you own a house, you're probably paying property tax, and if you're paying property tax, it's going towards local education. You should at least try and get you and a bunch of people who think like you do get on the school board and do everything you can to change locally. There are some towns around. I've been reading articles from towns around the country, and obviously when they're being reported on, they're being reported as the rebirth of the Third Reich, where a bunch of people got together and got themselves elected, and they just basically started firing all the leftists. And but I mean, if you're scared of being called a Nazi at this point, I mean, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to talk to you, because I've just gotten to the point where that's just the default of people calling me, even people who call themselves libertarians. So not only people on the left, but also they're useful idiots in libertarianism.
Yeah, that story that you were mentioning about how they took over the school board and they were kind of firing all the people they didn't want there. I'm sure. I mean, the whole what about it? Well, if it was flipped, then all the people they would do the exact same thing. They would not want any of the right wingers or any of the people to the right of whoever. Get the hell out of here. This is our school board now. We're going to do all the drag queen story hours we want because we own this school. Okay, well, then get all the right wingers to own another school across the town and do something different over there. And then see who wins. The whole competition. There you go. Have a competition of the school. Which school is going to have the most kids to go, and who's going to have the one that most people want to go because, we're actually learning something at that school as opposed to watching whatever the hell is happening in this other school, watching people dressing up, whatever, which is really weird that I'll be watching a YouTube video and then all of a sudden the fairy godmother pops up, but it's not a lady. It's not a lady. But I when did that happen? That just happened a year ago? All of a sudden all these freaking fairy godmothers are coming up, but it's not. It's a freaking man. Come on. It's fairy godmother. It's in the name, mother. It's not fairy godfather. Come on. What do you want, freaking Tony Soprano there? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's crossed over into the absurd. It's absurd, and we see it. And my wife reminds me of this all the time. She's like, "Look, you're not the only one who sees this." She's like, "A lot of people are seeing this. Just most people aren't like you. Most people aren't willing to put themselves on the line, to put themselves out there. Most people don't want to get fired from their jobs, and they can get fired from their jobs for having wrong opinions and everything. And people don't have the time to read like you do and things like that. And once you realize that was another thing about libertarianism is, a lot of libertarians would be like, if we just get people to read this book, if we just get people to read Anatomy of the State, if we just get people to read, and I would love for people to be able to, understand the nature of the state and exactly what it is, and exactly why the one that we're living under now is so horrific. But it's never been. It's very rare that you have a a majority, or not even a majority, but a a plurality of people who can cause change. When it comes down to it, it's normally a very small group of people, like the founders, elites, who come together, and they're the ones who initiate change. They're the ones who, because it's much easier for, yeah. I try to figure out how many people in Washington D.C. actually like run the country, and I'm thinking it's about probably around 2,000. Okay, they don't all know each other. I think a lot of them are not even the 535 in Congress, but it's a lot easier to get 2,000 people on the same page than 335 million. So once I realized that if anything's going to change, it's not going to come from like this gigantic movement of people just all of a sudden waking up, because it's not going to happen. You can do things to people, to large masses of people, that will cause them to rebel. But if, ask yourself, if 2020 didn't do it, what is going to? Once I realized that, like elite theory teaches that you need like a small group of elites to replace the elites in charge. And, you need those people to share your values and be on your side and be your friends. That was actually white pilling. That black pills so many people. It black pills so many people. And I don't know why that's so black pilling. It's so much easier to raise up like 10 to 20 people who, are pillars of the community, or have vast amounts of wealth, to defeat the elites in charge now. And elites are always fighting. People have this idea that all the elites are in it together. I mean, there's a circulation of elites that happens all the time. Some people are elite, some people, and they get into elite positions, and then they drop out and other people take their place. Look at the Sacklers. The Sacklers owned this country for a number of years, and now they still do make a lot of money, but they do not hold the sway that they did at one time. Once you realize you know, that 10 to 20 people can really sway and start swinging things, that's the white pill. I mean, the black pill to me is you got to get not a majority, but an insane amount of the population to start thinking about and wanting liberty. It's never existed. That's never existed. It's not. People just, it's the meme of people just want to grill, and those are the people that want to grill. You want them on your side, but they're not your thinkers. They're not people. They're not going to, you don't want people pulling the trigger for you, because you don't want this to be violent unless it's done, unless it's done legitimately. Somebody gets elected and they decide that they were going to forcefully start making change. But yeah, I once I realized that, I remember Kokesh one time said, we just need to convince 10% of the population. I'm like, that's 35 million people, man. That's 35 million people. That's an insane number when you start thinking about it. I grew up right across the street from Yankee Stadium, and when I was growing up, Yankee Stadium held 56,000 people. And you'd go in the stadium when it was packed, and you'd be like, look at this, is an insane amount of people. Or you go to a Giants game in Jersey and playing a Giants game. I think it held 72,000 at the time. And you'd be like, holy crap, this is an insane amount of people. I mean, I can't believe that there's this many people who are like interested in the same thing. 35 million people?
Yeah.
You think you're going to get 35 million people inclined towards, I mean, people vote Republican, or most people vote Republican or Democrat out of tradition. A lot of people, then you have your people in the middle who are, the independent voters, as everybody's trying for the independent voters. Those are the people who probably think a little more. But who of these people are radicals? Who of these people are, there are a lot of people who voted for Trump who thought that Trump was going to change things. That should show you that the masses are retarded. Like Osho, or is that Osho who said that? He said, democracy is great, democracy is bad people, but the people are retarded.
Yeah.
And, I mean, and they still, that's one of the reasons why, like, Trump boomers, God love them, but why they're so retarded is because, like, a lot of them never were seriously into politics until Trump. And then Trump gets into, Trump comes into politics, and they get into politics, and they have no idea how politics works other than what they were taught in civics class. And what they were taught in civics class doesn't exist. It's just not, it's not real. So then they had the hard wake, they got woken up hard, after the election and everything, because they saw what happened. And then, I mean, what's a worse wake up call than January 6th, where people are being sentenced to 10 years? I know of a guy who's looking at 10 years in prison who never went to Washington, D.C. So it's like, I mean, they're targeting their enemies now, and they're just doing everything they can to. I had a tweet yesterday where I said that, the United States puts sanctions on foreign countries, and they punish the people trying to get the people to overthrow the government, to overthrow their government. They tried to do it in Iraq. They've tried many places. Well, when you look at what they're doing now to Americans, throwing Americans in jail for basically, taking a tour of the Capitol, what you're seeing is them being punished for not only supporting Trump, but also for not rising up and overthrowing Trump, and then having the audacity after the 2020 election to question it. And so when you see people being punished for that now, I look at it as the way they would try to sanction Iraq and or the way they blockade Yemen. It's like, well, if the Yemeni people are starving enough, they'll rise up and they'll overthrow their people. They'll overthrow their leaders. And it was, I think it was Foucault of all people who said that once an empire got sick of overseas adventures, they would turn the armies inward. And I think we're seeing that now. I think that's this regime that I estimate this regime has lasted since probably like the Treaty of Versailles, World War I, but it really came into its own power through the New Deal. Yeah, I mean, good luck. I don't think it's impossible, but it's not. If they've been doing it for 100 years, it's not something you can do overnight. I mean, unless there's a way you can do it overnight, but it would be bad. It would be bad.
Well, we'll go ahead and end it there, Pete.
On the total black pill, and which wasn't a Fed post. That wasn't a Fed post, people. I was talking about like somebody getting elected, like a Caesar or a Franco or someone like that, who just absolutely went crazy and started, purging. So I'm not. Yeah, but if the person's democratically elected, that's all that matters, right?
Yes, that's all that matters. So let people know where they can find your show and follow you on social media and anything else you'd like to plug.
Sure. The Pete Quinones Show, any podcatcher, I'm still on all of them. YouTube, I only put up clips and then of the videos and point you towards Rumble, Odyssey, and BitChute, because YouTube demonetized me and I'm not gonna give them anything anymore. And PeteSubstack.com. I try to write 3 articles a week. With the vacation last week, I took some time off and got my got some new ideas and everything, and fired one off yesterday. And I think I'm going to be back on schedule, my regular schedule Monday, and then myself and some friends of mine on what is called the Dissident Right put together a little fraternity called the Old Glory Club. And we have a Substack, we have a YouTube channel. We live streamed yesterday with myself and Paul Fahrenheit. We had Tom Luongo on, who's still a libertarian, still calls himself a libertarian, to talk about the debt ceiling being basically eliminated until 2025. And we put out articles all the time, and I try to do as much as I can as far as appearing on the live streams and chipping in. But there's some great guys over there like Paul Fahrenheit and Dave the Distributist, and who am I forgetting? Everyone. I'm forgetting Chris and Radical Liberation, Stephen Carson, who Mises Institute guys, edited one of Tom Wood's books. He's been around forever. And the brilliant Ryan Turnipseed, just turned 20 years old, and I'm like looking at him and I'm just upset at the level of knowledge that he has already. And I'm just between him and like him at 20 and Paul Fahrenheit at like 23, 24 years old, I'm like, the future is bright, but God, I wish I knew that much at that age.
Well, better late than never, as they say, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, once again, thanks so much, Pete, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
No problem. I appreciate you asking, and anytime.
And tune in next time, where our guest will be Adam Morgan of Cinnabar Calisthenics. Really looking forward to that one. So, all right, we will see you in the next. The truck's backing up because they're hearing us. I think it's time to end this episode.
And smash that like button.
Yeah, smash that like button.
Just break your computer.
And don't forget to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button.
Bye.
Bye.